Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about Dark Side of the Ring, the Chris Benoit story. It was in two parts. It was very tragic and sad. Took me back to some of my
Man.
like childhood, I guess. Well,
Yeah, it was like
yeah.
1999, 2000, 2000. I mean, like,
No.
that's all.
Well.
Well, like, I mean,
Yeah.
like the earlier stuff with,
Oh yeah. When we
yeah, we're
first
talking about like
when we first
Eddie and stuff
introduced
like
into
that.
them.
I
Yeah.
mean, because Eddie passed, what, in 2005. So if you
And
think
then
about it,
Benoit was 2007,
yeah.
I
So,
believe.
I mean, for us going back, it's like WCW days, watching these guys and their career and things
Yeah,
like that.
and
But, yeah,
being
it's,
being Hispanic, Eddie Guerrero was always a big part of wrestling for us.
it started off nice because it was supposed to be a biopic, a story, a retelling of the people who were impacted,
Hmm.
about the tragic death of, um tragic suicide murder, that's what it was, of Benoit and his family. But we also got to see some great beginnings of like Guerrero's, like Eddie's
Yeah,
story, which was really cool to see, like Chavo and um
Vicky.
and to see Vicky, was just to see younger pictures of them and them being happy and hearing the stories and seeing them in New Japan Pro Wrestling, which hardly gets any credit for the beginnings of a lot of
Yeah,
legends. Yeah, it's almost like WWE or whatever
yeah.
decides to
Well,
just like nothing matters. You're
for
established now.
for the longest, WWE had done that, where
Yeah,
your history didn't matter outside WWE. You were brand new in WWE, and that was it. Um,
yeah.
and now they're starting to finally start recognizing, to an extent, because they also did that new documentary where they make it seem like Seth Rollins and all them came out of
Becky and
WWE.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. They still kind of downplay the fact that before WWE they were nothing.
yeah. Even though
Um,
these people were in ROH, New Japan, touring England, touring Mexico, like, but yeah. So for me, Eddie Guerrero is one of my top wrestlers. I think you had mentioned it
yeah,
before too.
yeah. He's my top wrestler. If I could have met one,
Yeah.
he's my
Um,
number one.
and it was just sad seeing how much him and Chris Benoit put into the business. I remember when I liked WCW, was the cruiserweights for me. I know
Yeah,
everybody made a big deal about NWO and all that stuff, but for me it was the cruiserweights. It was Jericho, Dean Malenko, um, Rey Mysterio,
travel.
Chavo. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I enjoyed. I guess because of what introduced me into wrestling was lucha libre, and that was the closest to lucha libre for me that I could kind of start transitioning into American wrestling. So it was cool seeing how their friendship grew, though, like how they
how they
they
hated each
hated
other
each other in
first.
the beginning,
Yeah,
and they made them work everywhere together. And seeing Chavo react the way he was reacting, retelling stories, it's very emotional.
yeah, because it puts you in a really happy spot for like a good half of like, well, yeah, I mean, technically the first part of it, you're watching these two guys become like the big leagues and getting up to, the
Yeah,
at the time WWF standards, and working together. And they showed the highlight where they both won the
at
belts and they had their
WrestleMania.
kids, and everybody was crying and kids were screaming, and they're just hugging, embracing, and it's like, even the wrestlers like Jericho and everybody that was interviewed was like, it was one of the times where the writers got it right and they gave back what the people really
Yeah,
wanted for that moment, like, this Cinderella moment. It was a storybook ending. Yeah, but it's just, I guess when you go back, because we were real young. I mean,
yeah,
when Eddie died, we were like 18. I want to say, yeah, 2005, around there, 18, still 18,
yeah.
19.
We were still in high school.
Yeah, and growing up, something like you hear it and you're just like, you can't really put the one and two together, and you really, at that time we both kind of fell off of wrestling too a little bit.
It was around that time
Yeah,
when WWF and WCW kind of like got merged into one, and that's when we started kind of like moving away from it. Um, Also, McMahon started changing the cruiserweights. Like
yeah,
you start seeing them gain more muscle, becoming more stiff when they attacked. It was just
steroids.
yeah, and then you to hear the Vicky talking about how Eddie was so scared of losing his spot, even though he was injured, and he was clearly showing concussion syndromes symptoms, and
Work when he was hurt,
yeah,
in
and
pain.
he just didn't want to stop. He didn't want to stop
No.
because he told her if he stopped, somebody else would take his spot, and it's sad that you know Eddie might still be here if they would have just realized that he was dealing with some concussions, because
Yeah.
the way he passed away was tragic. Him and Chavo and Chris Benoit were supposed to work out and get ready for a pay-per-view, and it's the fact that I mean I don't want to put it all on McMahon. I just want to say the business at that time was
It
just
was heavy on them because
yeah,
everybody
like
was.
you couldn't take a day off.
You could tell if you go back and like watch, like now it's like everybody. I don't want to say gets their fair shot, but like everybody has a little bit of time. I want to say like WWE, they're trying to give everybody FaceTime.
But then again,
Or
you got the CM Punk thing
they
too, where
yeah
they forced him to when he was injured.
yeah, it
So
has the things too. But I'm just saying, like, but if you go back and watch like the Attitude Era, it's like there was constant chaos.
oh yeah,
There was people you could tell. I don't even know if it was just because it was the Attitude Era and there was chaos, or because they were all fighting to be that one. Like, even like at the height of stuff, you have Mankind falling off the cage.
yeah.
You have like, Austin attacking people in the hospitals and all these setups and all these weird things. And it's like, it was constant and constant. It's something always, it's happening. It's in your face. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I mean that was the whole thing of the Attitude Era
yeah.
was
So we
how
just
how WCW or WWF could push the limits and
top each other.
top each other.
Yeah.
And
And it took a lot on the toll on
then
the wrestlers.
even in football, people weren't even aware of CTE. They
No.
weren't aware of how many of those unprotected headshots, how much damage that was doing to the brain.
It just is crazy. Like the first part, like it's focused a lot on Eddie and Eddie's role and how like religion played into like Benoit and how Benoit was a real quiet guy, but like for some reason, those two. I mean, Eddie was loud. He's Hispanic, he's a loud guy, and how they attracted each other, the two opposites. But it's sad to hear like Chavo and Benoit would like put Eddie on his side because they were worried he was gonna like OD on himself. Like in the first part, it's like it's a tragic story about
self-medicating for the pain,
about Eddie and how Eddie was like the glue. And I don't know if Eddie would have still been around. I don't want to say that maybe the things that Benoit did would have not happened, but I feel like it was like a snowball effect. It was a small snowball, and the minute like Eddie passed, it just went off the side, and it just kept getting larger and larger until Benoit just whatever happened to him that weekend, he just couldn't take it.
Well, I mean, it shows signs. I know at the time everybody was saying it was roid rage and all that stuff,
Yeah,
but he showed signs of CTE because even Vicky talks about how he had no control over his emotions. At times, he would just start crying uncontrollably, and that's a clear sign of CTE where you no longer have control of your emotion. I think Eddie was his anchor. Eddie was the one that kind of helped him put his feet on the ground and kind of like focus on something, since they had such a strong friendship. And I think once Eddie was gone, he felt lost. He didn't know how to deal with this anger.
He had no one to turn to. Like when Jericho was talking about like when they went to cities, he'll be like, "Oh, last time I was in Dallas or whatever city." He was like, "I was here with Eddie. Last time I was in Austin, I was here with Eddie." Like there was not another page for him to turn.
And it's not to say
page,
that if Eddie was still alive at that time, I don't know if Chris Benoit would have still done that. Maybe he would have. Maybe the brain damage that he suffered from all the concussions was just too much, or maybe like because Eddie was also in a path where he was injured and kept on wrestling. So I don't know. Like it just proves that wrestlers need an off season. That's the only sport that they don't get an off season to heal. They don't need doctors to be gimmick doctors they need real doctors. As soon as they see a concussion, the match needs to end. It needs to end in a no contest or
just don't let them keep continuing because I mean
it's not worth it.
Kairi Sane did it just
when
recently.
Kairi Sane had a concussion, I wrote an article about it. How you can't do that to these people. Like this is the only sport where you could have a concussion and they expect you to finish the show because the show must go on.
Yeah.
But you're putting someone's life on the line when you do that. And in any sport, when there's a concussion, they'll pull you out
Yeah, and
because
they
now
don't
because of
here.
all the lawsuits that have been happening, football didn't used to do that, and now they're one of the ones that are trying to push for it. Soccer, they're trying to push for it, and I think wrestling needs to start doing that. They have to have a concussion protocol. If you're wrestling and you're concussed, make it a no I don't know, like void the match if you don't
Yeah,
want to
no
mess with the
contest or something like
storyline.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense because man, I don't know. Like it's like he was in. It sounds like he was in sound mind, but then when they did the autopsy and the one former wrestler, they were able to get his brain, and you could tell there was even parts where it looked like it was decaying, and like
yeah,
this like
yeah. He had clear signs of
it's
CT.
so tragic to know that he because if you guys don't know a little bit about stuff like I had a friend who had a brain tumor, and little signs like it was the weirdest things, like she couldn't smell, and she had allergies, and but the what she thought was allergies was actually like brain fluid, and all the doctors kept on telling her, because she had no other symptoms, no headaches and things like that. When you have like these brain things, a lot of times tumors and growths and like deformities show up, have no symptoms, and not to say like going back to like would Eddie have caught it, maybe he would have caught his demeanor, his attitude, something in the way he was talking, because clearly up to the last text, like Chavo and everybody was like, man, he sent this weird text. So it was like everybody had that feeling something
Yeah,
was wrong, but nobody could have, like Jericho said, nobody would have expected.
yeah. And honestly, like it's a tragedy what happened, but like the real tragedy is the fact that he took the life of his wife and he took the life of his son. Like
Well, he took the life of his other son, who's
yeah, and now David has the stigma
yeah,
where
I mean,
where it's
like
hard for him to be able to wrestle. I know he wants to wrestle with the Chris Benoit Jr. name, and in wrestling, the name Chris Benoit is a stigma. They don't want that
yeah,
carried
no
around.
Benoit, no nothing,
Yeah,
but it's like when you hear his story, like him and like Vicky's was
yeah,
like the most heartbreaking parts of it. When Vicky talks about Eddie, when Vicky talks about how Benoit was crying, and then when David is just like, he was upset, he was mad, he's heartbroken, but he misses, he's like, he still idolizes his dad, that's his role model. And then when you hear about how he wanted to be a tag team partner with his brother,
yeah, with
it's
that,
like it makes you think of like the Bucks, you know what I mean? Like he wanted to be
the
that
Hardys,
person.
the Bucks.
Yeah, it's like, he saw Eddie and his dad be amazing together, and he's like, oh man, me and Daniel one day are going to be this tag team together. And
Yeah,
seeing the footage of them together, it's like, man, that would have been amazing to see these two kids who probably would have dominated in the wrestling industry.
yeah.
You know,
It's just like I think that's the real tragedy,
he can't move past.
and then Nancy has become a stigma too. Like
She doesn't get.
they don't mention her. They don't talk about what she did
She was
before.
strong.
Yeah, before Chris Benoit, or during the Chris Benoit stuff when
Yeah.
she was still in wrestling, being a manager. Um, and it's sad because it's one thing to say yes, Chris Benoit did a horrible thing and he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, because he really shouldn't. I know there's a lot of people that want to argue it. It doesn't matter. He murdered his son and his wife.
Sometimes you can't
You
separate
can't.
the
Yeah.
performer from their actions,
No.
and this is one time you're like, no, there was, even if it was just his wife, you know what I mean, but like
Yeah,
the
no,
child,
can't
man,
put
you can't.
you can't put a murder in the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame is supposed to be something you use. And I know some of the wrestlers in the Hall of Fame have uh,
Some shady past, yeah,
spousal abuse and drug abuse and all that stuff, but
you can't
Chris
overlook that.
Benoit, like even Jericho said, he almost he almost destroyed wrestling after,
Yeah.
because that's when people started like not watching wrestling as much. It was just this whole stigma
Yeah, saying it
of
was
the
it was
roid
really
rage,
fake. They're
and
saying
yeah,
that they're over, it's just entertainment, and these people are like abusing their bodies for
yeah.
pure entertainment. So it became more of the entertainment versus being a professional
And then I
wrestler.
think that's when a lot of other wrestlers started coming about the drug abuse and the
Yeah.
steroid abuse, and so you can't reward him for that, but
No.
you can't erase
Nancy.
Nancy, or
No.
woman as she was
Yeah, like Jericho
called,
said,
and
if you don't want to say Nancy Benoit, which was like, the name that she would have gone into, just woman.
yeah,
I mean, for what she was, like Jericho was saying, she defined a profession, a role that is really no longer there anymore. And she
yeah,
deserves her place because, man, she was a prevalent person. And to not give David or her sister or anybody else the moment to shine for
mm-hmm.
her, That's
But
not fair, and that's
but
also
I
a
think,
man dominated world again, where you're gonna criticize a woman's accomplishments and base them off a
but
man's.
see I think that's where you hit it in the nail. I
Yeah,
don't think McMahon wants to put
doesn't
her
care.
in the Hall of Fame
No.
because he does not want David Benoit there.
Yeah, and and that's wrong in itself
Yeah,
because as you go through the story as you're watching it, which it looks like it was like all in or all out, I should say, in Chicago Sears Center. Jericho got David and his aunt together the first time they've met. We picked up on that. It was a Sears Center, so it had to be, and he came
yeah,
out of wrestling, so it had to be I think something for
yeah. It
AEW.
had to have been all out. I think it was when
Yeah,
because Jericho had the scars and it
yeah.
was in Chicago, so that's when Jericho won the AEW belt.
And could you imagine those two being able to come together again and give Nancy the proper
Yeah,
send off she deserves, because she was remembered for the worst thing possible at the end, and not for her accomplishments that she did herself.
yeah.
Like, somebody pulled her out because she was beautiful, and then she took the role of just being beautiful and she made it into something
And she came out of a first marriage
that was,
that was abusive. So
and people say, like, what was going on behind doors, but once again, it doesn't matter.
no,
Like, people want to separate Benoit, from his actions versus his professional career. And yet he did something heinous. Nancy didn't do nothing
no.
heinous. You don't have to separate nothing. You just could just
she
put
should
her
not,
up there.
Yeah, she should not be erased
No,
from
just
wrestling
just
history.
put her on that platter, give her what she wants, and let Nancy and David, her sister and David go up there and give his mom, her sister, the rightful honor that she deserves.
That was his stepmom, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
stepmom. Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
But he called her his mom.
Yeah.
He called her his mom, and he never used the word
he
stepbrother
never
either.
used it. Yeah.
He said that was his brother.
But she was there he was real tiny.
Yeah.
He was like 6 in some of the photos when she was hugging him and stuff like that. So like,
Yeah, I hope that
somebody has to.
that David is allowed to just wrestle, and if he
wants
to
to
use
wrestle.
the last name Benoit, let him use the last name Benoit. Maybe he could make his own story. I know that people are trying to be stigma about it, but then also my other thoughts is I hope that there is a different Hall of Fame for wrestlers and it's not just WWE, because I don't think WWE should control it. I think that there should be a broader Hall of Fame that could incorporate.
Well, AEW started that before that one Dynamite. Remember they had the
they
Rock
did
and
the
Roll
Legends,
Express
yeah.
and stuff like that, and they had Ultimate Warriors. No, Macho Man's brother.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if they can do something, like, I'm not saying put all the pressure on AEW.
No, I don't even think AEW should do it. I think it should be
an outside organization.
It should be an independent organization of legends of wrestling coming together and them voting for who goes into the Hall of Fame. I think that's the best thing they could do. Kind of like how baseball and
not the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because they don't listen to any fan votes.
They have power.
Don't start me on that gripe. But yeah, no, yeah, that's
because WWE is always gonna change the story to how they want it, and they're only gonna put people that did something for WWE. When wrestling is way more than just WWE.
Yeah, it's and it's sometimes way more than just wrestling. It's what people do outside of that, or what people, the little bit of impact they had on certain people, and it's just like, Vicky alone, being able to make something, out of a devastating, experience when she lost Eddie, and being able to be the strong woman she is, and to make something out of herself, to be, to become this person in the WWE, to, provide for her family, and, and still come out of it. Because I know if she agreed with some of the storylines, I love you, Vicky, I'm not trying to say what you did was stupid. But some of it was like, I wanted so much for you. Like, I'm so happy where you're at right now, because you're expressing yourself. You're not letting anybody tell you what to say or what not to say. And that's the Vicky I've been wanting to see for years. Seeing her in AEW made me happy.
I hated that they made her go through some cringe storylines, and they humiliated her, and they did everything they could
But that
which
was
is
that
pretty
time
much
period, though.
but
They could
it
have
was
done
just
better
it was
for
just a
her.
couple of years ago when they did some of this stuff too. It was when
Was it?
CM Punk
Was
was
I'm
still
saying when
there.
Natty
Yeah,
did that stuff to Natty too.
yeah,
Like there's some like, and these are like associated legends.
yeah.
Like Natty comes out of a house of
But
legends.
you could see why.
Yeah.
Bret Hart did the thing that he did to
So
McMahon,
they punish
so
all
they
the
punished
women. Oh my
Natty.
God! Wait, is that a trend? They
Um,
punish all the women associated with dumb men who made decisions. Not saying Bret Hart made a dumb decision. I'm just saying that the main man is dumb.
I mean, they even punished Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah.
They gave him a stupid gimmick, and he pulled away from it and was able to make something out of it in WWF. But he was such a big legend in WCW, and
that guy could have sold, what is it, a ketchup popsicle to
yeah.
a lady with white gloves.
And then he comes to WWE, and they want to give him polka dots, and
he worked it.
yeah,
That man.
I mean, he same thing with
a lot of
Dustin. They gave him the gold dust thing, and he owned
shoot.
it. Cody, they gave him
Stardust,
and he's like, peace, and I'm gonna make my own and change the world, and he has. So
yeah. But it's just the women; they still get a lot of crap.
yeah, I mean, McMahon is very he's good to wrestlers. There's a lot of stories where he's done some really good stuff to wrestlers and looks out for them. But he also could be very vindictive, and there's a lot of stories where he could be super vindictive, like the whole China thing and everything else that happened.
But I know, like, the day after Benoit, when it was known what actually happened, a lot of pride was swallowed that day.
Yeah.
Because they idolized him when they found out of his passing. They gave the whole segment where they just did highlights. And the next day having to come back on and say, we're not going to mention his name. That was the day that kind of everything that happened associated with Benoit just died.
Mm-hmm.
But man, you know, like, not even though I really don't like him, I would have never put that on my worst enemy, because it takes a lot, because you messed up. Like JR said, nobody knew what was going on. You know, they sent poor JR to be representative to go to his, you know, the funeral of Nancy.
Yeah.
You know, and Daniel, and it's like, and nobody wanted him there, and I'm like, you sent one of the sweetest people you know, to get, you know, looked at, and it's just, you know, because he couldn't anymore. He couldn't put his tail between his legs and just take what happened. And it had nothing it was done to McMahon. I mean, yeah, McMahon maybe should have, you know, cared about the blood test and cared about the well-being of his wrestlers, but he didn't tell Benoit to do that.
No.
You know, that was something out of his control, and it's scheduling, you know, just like with this virus going on, you can't predict what's going to happen. And he couldn't predict that they were going to find out 24 hours later that this was a horrific event. But I just didn't like how that played out afterwards. I felt like he was passing the buck on people.
But yeah, McMahon is known to do that. I mean, look at Owen Hart and all that stuff. Like he put a lot of pressure on wrestlers. Even Hogan came out once about this way back in the day about the steroids and how McMahon wants them to look big and superhuman and all that stuff. And I mean, just look at Eddie and Benoit from WCW to WWF. How they changed.
The Warrior.
Yeah. Yep, all of them. Like
the Warrior. I mean, like the way he passed. You know, just it was an eye opener. It was sad. Freaking Vicky and
it's worth the watch.
Though. It's worth the watch. I know some people didn't watch it. Some people didn't care for it. I know Cody had mentioned something that didn't interest him because he couldn't.
Yeah, I mean,
and it's okay. It's okay, but you know, he has a different perspective being in the industry, and we have a different perspective. You know, I appreciated a lot of it because I got to see more of Eddie, and I got to see the relationship between the two, which shouldn't be a thing that should be erased either, because at some points Benoit was there for Eddie when Eddie needed somebody. So like, if it wasn't for him, maybe we wouldn't have had Eddie as long as we did. But and you know, to see Chavo and Dean Malenko, that was, you know, and Jericho, what he had to say, and I'm glad Jericho came out and he did a lot for them, and Chavo did a lot for David. Yeah, so I'm glad that there's still some good people in the industry, more good people now that we know of. So
yeah,
so but yeah, definitely give it a watch. We're probably gonna go back and watch some of the ones from the first season. Life's just been busy, so this was the first one that we heard that kind of caught our attention, even though there's been a lot of other good ones. But yeah, this is something that we lived through, and we kind of wanted to rewatch it, and like I said, it's pace yourself. It's a bumpy one, and it makes it's a tearjerker. I know a lot of guys were just yeah, and
Yep.
but yeah, those are our thoughts on it. But yeah, just take care of yourself, everybody out there.
Yep. And may Nancy and Daniel not be forgotten.
Yeah, and somebody give David
A shot.
a shot. That's our retrospect. If he wants the shot and he's worth the shot, because we can't just say the boy got talent because he has a Benoit name. But if he's worth the shot, somebody give him the shot. Don't let that happen. But yeah, those are our 2 cents. Once again, thank you guys for watching. Subscribe, share, like, leave some comments. We'll see you guys later.
All right. Bye.